Hey everybody, Marcus here. The life of each man within Western culture is marked off by a series of milestones. Firstly, he enters elementary school. Each of the 8 years, which constitute each of the 8 grades, are composed of a series of expectations externally imposed upon the man. He must complete assignments, write essays, and book reports. He must read assigned books and short stories, then hand in commentary that contains an interpretation, which is deemed acceptable by the rules of interpretation imposed on him. He is expected to sit through timed tests, which measure his ability to memorize and parrot back what has been put into his head. If he is successful and meets all these expectations to the satisfaction of what is almost certain to be a female teacher, he is granted approval to commence the cycle again with a higher class number and a heavier burden of expectations. After 8 years, this man goes to high school. In high school, he repeats this cycle for 4 more years, but is granted a level of choice to simulate freedom. Will he take English class in first period and geography in second period? Or will he choose geography in first period and English in second period? These 4 years go by much in the same fashion as did the first 8. He's continually groomed to seek the validation of an external authority with the anticipation that if he meets expectations, he will be rewarded with ever more challenging expectations. But this pattern is not exclusively contained to school. This pattern repeats itself in his interpersonal relationships as well. It is not controversial to say that every relationship, in general, follows a certain progression. In the first case, the man enters the dating phase of the relationship. At this stage, the expectations laid at his feet by the woman are the lowest they will be in the relationship. Though she will expect the man to pay for restaurants, bars, and the various other expenses that are incurred through going on dates, she will not expect her rent paid, nor her vacations. His time in the dating phase is also taxed at the lowest rate. The man may be expected to see and speak with her no more frequently than once a week. He will, not as of yet, be expected to serve as an emotional tampon for the woman. She will restrain herself in order to convey her best self. The dating phase itself also has a graduating component. When the relationship has gone on for a year or more, pressure will begin to be exercised upon the man on one of two fronts. He will either be expected to propose marriage, or she may suggest they move in together. If either of these events occur, the relationship is shifted to the next stage, namely the cohabitation stage. At this point, the expenses associated with day-to-day living such as rent, utilities, groceries, and even vacations will slowly be hoisted upon the shoulders of the man. The man has successfully graduated to a higher set of expectations. Following the cohabitation phase, marriage is the next logical expectation that will be put upon him. With marriage, a complete merger of his assets with her is the price he must pay. The woman now permits herself to demand large ticket items like cars and houses as part of what the man is meant to provide. Marriage used to be the end point of the relationship pipeline for much of human history. However, with no-fault divorce and the bias against men in the family court, one additional phase has become the norm. The final phase of the relationship is the divorce. Here, a majority of the man's assets, as well as his future labor, are permanently transferred to the woman while simultaneously freeing her from all obligations towards the man. After divorcing her current husband, the woman is free to start this relationship pipeline with another man. Though the story I have told is nothing insightful or interesting in itself, we need to look upon it carefully to evaluate its constituent parts. At its most basic level, we can visualize that each of these 4 stages of the relationship contain pressure, which is exerted by the woman upon the man. In turn, this pressure, in one form or another, always demands the parting of the man from his money. That money ultimately goes to some corporation. Whether the corporation is a humble restaurant, a luxury hotel, a jeweler, or a car dealership matters little. The pattern remains the same. It is obvious and uncontroversial to say that the male-female relationship pipeline is something many businesses plug into and rely on for their existence. Such corporations have it in their best interest to ensure that This relationship pipeline never runs dry. But the picture we have set up thus far is not yet the complete story. As we have described previously, at each stage of the relationship pipeline, ever more expensive expectations and pressures are put upon the man by the woman. Where a movie ticket and popcorn would have satisfied a woman's expectations at the dating phase, she will come to expect cars and houses at the marriage phase. However, it must also be noted that the set of expectations and pressures is cumulative. Though the woman may expect cars and houses at the marriage phase, she in no way has given up on her expectations of the man paying for dates, groceries, utilities, and everything else she has come to expect in the earlier phases. No, the pressures stack on the man as he moves through the pipeline, while he gains no more from the woman than what he received in the dating phase. You see, the dating pipeline is hypergamous in nature. The further down the pipeline the relationship progresses, the better deal the woman gets. In times past, this hypergamous progression would have terminated at the marriage phase. When a woman could not divorce at a whim, her hypergamous instinct had to be suppressed as there was no better deal waiting for her. However, with the laws and culture as they are, the hypergamous drive no longer needs to be shackled by marriage. Now, divorce is the better deal that follows after marriage. Divorce is not unlike the story of the man with the goose who laid the golden eggs. The woman wants to slaughter the goose to get at all the golden eggs at once. But unlike in the story, she will actually pull this off and is then free to find another golden goose she may slaughter at a later date. But here too, the plot thickens. It has been commonly understood in the MGTOW community that a woman is always seeking men who are of status and wealth above her own, and at a minimum at her level. This phenomenon can be roughly illustrated in the picture presented here. As a woman moves from unemployment to part-time, to full-time, to being a career woman, her hypergamy imposes expectations upon her, which in turn convert to requirements she has of the man she will enter the relationship pipeline with. Though many women have high requirements for the men they will date without actually having a career of their own, it must be understood that those that do have that career definitely have those high requirements. If one uses hypergamy as the key concept in forming female attraction to men, and simultaneously uses youth and beauty as the key concepts in forming male attraction to women, you are left with a singular chart explaining the male-female dynamic. The blue sideways pyramid indicates the status and wealth of men. On the left, we have TFL men, which are some combination of impoverishment and drawing the short straw in genetics. This is a group who is ultimately unattractive to all women. Further to the right, you will have impoverished men who are naturally, say, good-looking. Following that, the working class male, then the middle class male, then upper class males, and finally, the elite. Regardless of where a man is positioned in the pyramid, he is still subject to the relationship pipeline as indicated in the chart. The lines at the bottom indicate the relative quality of looks and beauty a woman possesses. As we can see, a supermodel has access to the entire spectrum of men. A supermodel can have a TFL man if she chooses, or she could have someone from the elite. As the hypergamy arrow points to the right, a woman will always choose the man at the far right peak that her looks will permit. As such, the supermodel, having the elite as something accessible to her, will choose someone of the elite. The hot woman, on the other hand, will not have access to the elite, but will have access to the entire range leading up to the elite. As the hypergamy arrow points to the right, the hot woman will choose the upper class male as he is still within her reach. This process repeats itself down to the lowest category, which I have simply called woman. If a woman is completely devoid of both youth and beauty, then her only option will be to draw from the pool of TFL men. As we have previously established that this group of men are uniformly undesirable by all women, then the lowest rung of women will be alone forever, as they will have no pool of desirable men for them to draw from. The top set of rows indicate the social and economic status of a woman. These rows inform us of what a woman will demand of a man dependent on her social and economic status. The top row shows an impoverished woman. Such a woman will be content with the entire spectrum of men, other than the TFL group. As the hypergamy arrow points to the right, The impoverished woman will be limited to who she can actually get based on her youth and beauty. If she is impoverished and a supermodel, she would consider an impoverished man but can attain someone from the elite. So, she will follow, circumstances permitting, her hypergamous instinct and reject all men outside the elite. If such a woman were to shack up with an impoverished man, she would trade up as soon as circumstances presented to her someone higher on the hypergamous pyramid. However, we have mentioned earlier that as a woman increases her own social and economic status, her expectations of men increase. In this way, a working class woman will no longer tolerate impoverished men. A middle class woman will not tolerate impoverished or working class men, and so on. This phenomenon of elevated expectations creates a class of women who will ultimately die alone. Let us take the example of the homely middle class woman. As a homely woman, we refer to the rows at the bottom of the graph and see that she can attract TFL and impoverished men only. However, as she is a middle class woman earning a middle class salary, she will only consider middle class men and above as viable candidates. As middle class men can attract women, homely women, average women, and attractive women, middle class men will not settle for a homely woman, as a homely woman is lower than what they can get. In this way, the homely middle class woman cannot resolve her expectations for a man against what her looks will permit her to get. Therefore, such a woman will never find a man who she does not consider she has settled for, well, in the best of cases. In the worst case, she will never find a man at all. Now, those people who like to shame MGTOW do so by inferring that those men who consider themselves MGTOW reside in the TFL part of the pyramid. As such critics cannot conceive a life outside of the pyramid, they necessarily must position everyone somewhere within it. In this way, they position MGTOW in the TFL group. However, well, this is quite silly. MGTOW exists outside the pyramid. Individual MGTOW under the blue pill setup come from every part of the pyramid originally. There are those who may have come from the TFL portion, and there are those who come from the impoverished class, the working class, the middle class, upper class, and maybe even from the elite too. One of the main objectives of every MGTOW is to purge his habituated thinking about where he is in this pyramid. His goal is to reforge an identity outside the pyramid and never compare himself to others on the terms dictated by this pyramid. The blue pill pipeline, as presented at every class of men within the pyramid, is something that MGTOW, for the most part, do not participate in either. Now, to close this video, I want to put a new idea out into the community. Well, new at least that I haven't heard before. When Darwin published On the Origin of Species, and the concept of evolution entered the mainstream consciousness of academics, an interesting thing happened. The concept of evolution was applied to fields other than biology. We now have evolutionary psychology, for example, among many of the fields that took the evolutionary paradigm and applied it to their own domain. What I have done in this video is took the hypergamy paradigm and applied it to the internal workings of relationships. By applying the concept of hypergamy to the relationship structure as a structure, it is clear to see that hypergamy fits well into the dynamic between a man and a woman in a relationship as much as it does in determining the parties who will form the relationship. This same approach can probably be applied to other areas. For example, can it be defended that those areas where women dominate have a gradual shift in the system where the system takes on a hypergamous nature to it? For example, institutional increase in rewards for an ever-diminishing demand and obligation? Can we leverage the concept of hypergamy within MGTOW to try and analyze things other than male-female dynamics as informed by women's hypergamous instinct? Well, this indeed is something worth considering. But for now, thanks for listening. Go team.